Sorry, I'm going to go faster as the day grows on. Mr. Merkley, followed by David Elajim.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. We'd like to also thank you and staff for recognizing the challenges that districts have that supply water to both urban and ag customers. We would like to suggest or recommend that you remove the arbitrary numbers for the ag water that's supplied to districts and have those districts be able to back out that amount of water supplied to agriculture and also report that and certify those numbers to you. So with that, I'll be short and sweet to help you move along. Thank you.
Thank you very much. David Elajim, followed by Tracy Quinn from the Natural Resources Defense Council.
Good afternoon, Chair Marcus, members of the board. David Elajim, Downey Brand, here primarily on behalf of the cities of Santa Clara and Healdsburg. Like everybody else this afternoon, I want to thank you and your staff for the tremendous amount of work that has gone into these regs. We could spend probably days, if not weeks, trying to fly spec them. I don't think that's a useful activity at this point in time. I do want to build on something that Joe Grindstaff said a couple of hours ago now, and also something that Martha Davis has said over the years, and that is that water is water, and we need to treat water as water. And the primary thing that I would like to offer for your consideration this afternoon is the way in which we can use this crisis, and I think you are all correct in saying it's a crisis, as a way to advance the use of recycled water in this state. As a member of the Recycled Water Policy Task Force, you know that I have some experience in putting together these regs. What we have here is an opportunity, not in the next 15 days, but over the next 6 months, to substantially advance the use of recycled water in the state, through whether it is through Purple Pipe, through IPR, or DPR. The cities of Healdsburg and Santa Clara have been leaders in that effort. We are running into all sorts of administrative obstacles in actually putting water to use. We're asking for your help in, as the governor said in the executive order, streamlining those processes so that a year from now, if heaven forbid this drought continues, we are now able to really shift a lot of the demand to recycled water. And we will not be having the very difficult conversations we're having this afternoon. Thank you. Be happy to take any questions.
Happy to work with you on that. Tracy Quinn, followed by Emily Rooney from the Agricultural Council of California.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Tracy Quinn. I'm a civil engineer and policy analyst with the Natural Resources Defense Council. This is an important and historic day for California. The unprecedented move to set mandatory reduction targets is a necessary mechanism to ensure adequate supply of potable water to protect public health, meet future essential indoor demands, and maintain sufficient supply and pressure for firefighting in this unprecedented drought.
Pull it closer so everybody
Sorry,
on the
I
web
forgot
can
I'm
hear you too.
A little shorter than that guy.
I'm going to start calling him that guy from now on.
Okay. I'd like to commend the board members and board staff for moving so quickly. This is a matter that demands urgency, and we support the board adopting the proposed emergency regulations today with just a few changes that I'll discuss in my comments. The first has to do with the proposal to exclude commercial agricultural demands. First of all, we don't believe that these exclusions were factored into the board's target calculations. Therefore, the calculations would need to be revised to ensure a 25% statewide reduction in potable water use, thereby delaying this proposal. Furthermore, the additional savings needed would then be pushed to other water suppliers, which is not equitable. And finally, the expansive definition of commercial agriculture currently cited in the emergency regulations is overly broad and would allow uses such as the irrigation of avocado and citrus trees on suburban ranchettes and hobby farms, which are essentially landscape and lifestyle choices for residential customers, to also be excluded. This was not the intent of the exclusion, which was to reduce economic impacts on truly commercial agriculture. At a minimum, NRDC recommends that the proposed language of Section 865 be modified such that the exclusion of potable water deliveries would apply to tracts of 5 acres or more. How a supplier meets its targets is left to the discretion of the individual supplier. Therefore, if a supplier wants to exclude these ranchettes and hobby farms from local conservation policies, that's their prerogative. But it's simply not equitable to push any additional savings to other water suppliers so that a large residential property can maintain their landscaping. We've provided some recommended language in our May 3rd comment letter, and I have a copy with me if you'd like to take a look, or I can read it into the record if you prefer. But in the light of the time, I'll forgo that for now. With regard to your requirements for smaller water systems, the State Board defines small water systems as those with fewer than 3,000 customers, which DWR and the Board have interpreted as service connections. This means that the larger of these smaller systems can have upwards of 9,000 or 10,000 individual of a population of 9,000 to 10,000. The EPA, on the other hand, defines small water systems as fewer than 3,300 people. We still believe that there is no compelling reason to exclude public water suppliers serving more than 3,300 people from the emergency regulations monthly reporting and target setting. And we are doubtful that restricting landscape irrigation to 2 days per week will achieve the 25% reductions. We recommend that the board use the EPA's definition of small water systems so that a larger number of communities can be incorporated into these regulations. And then I just have 2 other quick ones really quick. We recommend that the board ban the use of potable water for sprinkler irrigation of ornamental turf by CII users. Such a ban would avoid a large volume of highly visible, non-essential potable water use in a customer class that may otherwise be difficult to address with a simple numerical percentage reduction. And finally, a few water suppliers have mentioned equity issues, particularly those who are in more arid regions and see higher summertime water usage. Climatic differences really only impact outdoor water use. Whether you live in Palm Springs or San Francisco, your essential indoor water uses remain the same. Any allowances based on climatic differences are essentially incentivizing landscaping choices that are inappropriate for the local environment. Arid regions should strive to use less water than the more temperate regions of our state. We have to keep our eye on the ball here. As has been said a few times today, we don't know when this drought is going to end, and if it extends into 2016 or 2017 and beyond, we really need to think about the things we'll regret. And Madam Chair, you mentioned that earlier today. We need to focus on protecting public health and ensuring adequate supplies for essential indoor uses for this and for future droughts. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, Emily Rooney, followed by Helen Dowden.
Good afternoon, Chair Marcus and members of the board. My name is Emily Rooney. I'm president of Agricultural Council of California. Ag Council represents approximately 15,000 farmers across the state of California, from small farmer-owned businesses to some of the world's best-known brands. Some of our members are food processing entities that have to comply with this regulation because their processing plants do receive water from urban water suppliers. We have, as an example, the city of Tulare has quite a few of dairy processing plants, including Land O'Lakes, Kraft. Land O'Lakes is our plant, but they are farmer-owned. They're a cooperative. Kraft, Saputo has a couple of plants there, and there's about 3 or 4 other processing plants there. And we are concerned, getting back to the comments made earlier about cities where they have a high sort of industrial commercial use of water and how those impacts may especially impact some industrial commercial uses. I'm going to admit there's been a lot of confusion on our end as to whether or not our members have been impacted by this regulation. And again, and a lot of that was discussed earlier today, going back to differing interpretations of what different jurisdictions are saying. As an example, I would disagree with the previous comments about the definition of commercial ag being too broad. We think it's too narrow. The city of Tulare was going to use that as an example to help us help work with the food processing industry in regards to water use for food safety purposes specifically. But now that that definition has changed, they are claiming that their hands are tied. So we're going to have to work through that process. Our members are recycling water where it's appropriate throughout the plant for irrigation purposes and the like. And we're also looking at other measures right now. Because of the drought, they know, they are farmer owned, so they know that the severe drought we're in, they hear about it every day outside of the water board, so this is not new to them. But water use is critical for food processing, specifically in regards to food safety purposes. It's used throughout the process to power boilers and wash and peel fruit, and it's required for food safety practices. There are strict guidelines by USDA. The consumers require it, and all the major buyers do of us. But I want to give a specific example of where potable water is required for our food processing. There's a process called clean in place that basically requires the bulk of our water use. It happens every 12 to 19 hours where the production lines are cleaned and sanitized. It's about a 4-hour process, so the production line is closed for 4 hours. And at the end of this process, potable water is actually run through the lines before more food can be processed. And there's no way to decrease that food sanitation process without impacting production. So that's really where we want our conversation to be had, is about how to deal with these issues where we can't get away from potable water use. I was looking at the staff resolution here, trying to figure out a way that we can work ourselves into the stakeholder process. I'm looking at specifically number 16 here, and it says, the last section talks about, determining alternate methods of compliance if the conservation standard is unachievable. It talks about doing this as part of the enforcement process. I would urge us to do this ahead of the enforcement process, and we would participate in that process, and so long as there's stakeholder input allowed on that. But I'd like to get ahead of the curve if at all possible. We really need a venue to sort of vet some creative solutions. I've been sitting next to Eric Larson from San Diego Farm Bureau today, and I in no ways want to oppose his definition of agriculture. There's a reason why they think it should be narrow, but maybe there's other alternatives for us to find. Allow water use for food safety purposes. Maybe we get it included in the public and health needs piece or something like that. But we need a venue to talk about potential solutions. So I assure you, this morning I was talking to my members, and they are turning off the sprinklers this morning. but we are still needing some help on the food safety piece for sure.
Good. Thank you. On the list for discussion, to be sure. Helen Dowden for Nexus E-Water, followed by John Rossi from Western Municipal Water District.
I'm Helen Roth Dowden, representing Nexus E-Water, and I wanted to address Section 864A8, the irrigation outside homes and buildings section. We support the use of building standards in HCD. They are both quick and effective, so thank you for that. But we think you need to address more than just drip and drought-friendly landscape and the construction of new homes. We support this, but we think you need to address savings beyond this. And so we would ask you to support on-site produced non-potable recycled water for indoor and outdoor use. 2/3 of the water in a house can be reused. So we think that this would lead to a much greater savings of water. We need to incentivize on-site reuse in new construction to reach our conservation goals in California, and we need the board to send a signal to those in cities, water districts, and to developers that this is an alternative that can be used. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Can you all put that on the list for figuring out whether we can address it in the resolution to encourage creative solutions, including that?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi, followed by Robert Hunter from the Municipal Water District of Orange County.
Madam Chair and members of the board, we truly are in a water crisis. I remember the first part of my career talking to community groups about my worst fear was we had a water break or some other problem and we wouldn't have enough water to water outdoor lawns for the summer. So watch what you ask for. Appreciate the board, appreciate the governor and staff working so hard to move so quickly, and staff being open and willing to talk with us, the different water groups and individual water agencies as they work through this. Western Wholesale Retail Agency in Southern California, Riverside, worked hard to be an early adopter. In fact, we planted our first demonstration garden for water use efficiency in 1989 and have routinely updated it with technology to demonstrate how we can do things more effectively. We also, working with RPU, spoke earlier, developed a freesprinklernozzle.com program, web-based, now about 1.5 million free sprinklers in 20 counties around the state of California. Is just a way to get technology in the hands of homeowners who oftentimes don't know what to do, how to get started. Worked in the Inland Empire to get labels on drought-appropriate plants with Home Depot. They really stepped up so that when people finally say, I want to do something, they can go in and get a head start on what they can do to make a difference. I think what I've been hearing and some of our comments in the letters that we provided as well talk about the fairness and equity issue on some of the things that have already been mentioned. Staff had it on the slides. The ability to use some of the drought-proofing supplies. We've invested in groundwater desalters, for example. Looking at the different ways early adopters, again, have allocated water budget rates, which we did in 2010, having about 25% since 2010 to 2013, but needing to do another 28% going forward. But we understand, again, we're in a water crisis. These things need to happen. We all need to move together. So I wanted to take just the last minute here and talk about the retail customer. That's something really we've come to appreciate incentives. You've heard a lot about the metropolitan programs in Southern California, and incentives do help people move ahead. In a crisis is a little different situation, but I'm here to support the work group concept that we can get together and take the next 6 months, whatever it's going to be. Heaven help us, we don't get rain this winter, but we may be here having these kind of discussions. And I think a lot of things here embedded in this discussion are ultimately long-term policy issues that we support, but again, we need to deal with that retail customer fairness and equity. I have a 218 hearing in September. Last time we did a 5-year process, and to explain to customers that though we were early adopters and we have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in stormwater capture and desalting and other things, they weren't included. Well, there was a reason for that now, but there's not a good explanation long term. These issues, as we all know, can't be described in an elevator speech. They're very difficult issues. So I really encourage strongly, again, this work group concept, which you've already put on the table, so that water managers and other stakeholders can get together and really think about this in the long term. So appreciate your time.
Thank you for the time you will spend, as well as past time. Hi, Mr. Hunter, followed by Richard Lyon from the California Building Industry Association.
Thank you, Chair Marcus. Excuse me. I'm Robert Hunter. I am the General Manager of the Municipal Water District of Orange County, MODOC. You've heard from several of my 28 member agencies today. I won't repeat their comments nor my letter, but I'd like to clarify a few items, particularly in the area of the timeline or timing and the subject that's come up repeatedly about grass and lawns. First of all, we all appreciate the time that you all have put in, both you and the board and you and the staff. Tremendous effort to get this up over this short time frame. I doubt if many of you had many offline moments to relax.
I'm on my 3rd cup of coffee. That's more than I should drink.
Only 4 more left today.
That's right.
We only have 4 weeks till this goes into effect. We've heard some great programs today dealing with leaks, dealing with pipes, dealing with other aspects, but unless you're doing those now, 4 weeks is enough time, not enough time to implement those. Yes, this is cumulative in terms of looking at it, but if you're not hitting the ground running 4 weeks from now, you are going to be behind the curve.
You're not
So-
hitting the ground running already, you're behind the curve.
Absolutely.
And everyone's been on notice, so everyone should be off and running for
I
a
agree.
year.
I
Sorry,
absolutely
didn't mean
agree.
I'll give you more time. Sorry, I couldn't.
But within 4 weeks, if you're not doing it now, you're really talking about behavior. Indoor, you're talking shorter showers, period. You're not talking about rebates. You're not talking about anything else. Outdoor, you're talking about reducing your irrigation by 50%. Plain and simple. That's the plan. That's been going on. You have to have gone now. My budget for rebates over a one-year period went from $3 million to over $20 million. That activity is going on. In Orange County, 10 million square feet of turf was replaced. In our agencies last year, 10 million square feet will be done again this coming year. The governor's goal is 50 million square feet. That's 20 million of 50. Huge things are going on there.
Can I just interrupt just quickly? How much, if, I remember when it wasn't Orange County, but in LA, a city had a turf replacement program that was very, very successful, oversubscribed. And but when they figured out how much turf would need to be replaced over, you know, to meet their goals, it was going to take 100 years. So have you done that same kind of calculation in Orange County? Because there's a lot of turf in Orange County.
I have not done that calculation of how much would be needed, but I do know that we are investing a tremendous amount of money, particularly when you look at the cost of the water. So it is about driving behavior. It is about investing more than you're actually recouping in that year. I changed my lawn out this year, and I believe the payback in terms of my water savings is about 8,000 years to recoup that money. But it's the right thing to do. It's not about
Must
the
have done a
payback.
really good job, or paid your landscaper a
small
lot of
lawn.
money.
And as we all know, water is actually cheap. I'd like to talk just about a few things, though, here. Lots of things going on in water or in savings and program. The indirect potable reuse. There was a statement this morning at some point that we can't believe that people will be deciding not to develop more reliable water. But in fact, we have people who are deciding not to do that. They're deciding to do that because of the expense of things like desal. And the way that we're approaching indirect potable reuse is exactly along those lines. We are including, by reducing the production number, purple pipe numbers. When someone like my member agencies and OCWD decides we're going to invest more, we're going to get a higher use water that can't be used just for industrial or just for lawns, but can be used indirectly for drinking water. We're going to pay more money for that, and then we don't include that. We treat it as a stepchild of reuse. We're telegraphing a message, no, that's a bad decision because it doesn't pay off and it's not valued in the regulations.
You know what I don't understand? I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with this from having been on the recycled water business years ago. I don't get that, because the reason for, and I get the need to encourage it, and I'm all for talking about it in the work group, but to say that sends that message as opposed to that it's a precious resource to be saved, you're doing it to protect the future of your community in terms of extending your potable water resource. So taking what we're doing in an emergency regulation, I'm obviously irritated by this. I'm not irritated by you. But I think it's overselling the problem to say that we should come up with a nuanced way, but to say all of a sudden regulators are saying it's less important than recycled water, I don't buy that.
I would say.
So am I
that
misunderstanding you?
I think perhaps you are. That in fact, that is the message you're saying. If I as a utility have a limited capital budget, and I can take that budget and I can put it into purple pipe. And if I have 10,000 acre feet in production, and this is going to be a 3,000 acre foot project, my production drops to 7,000 acre feet, which brings my per capita calculation down. It allows me to come into compliance.
You're going to have
If
to show me
instead-
the math on
if-
that,
if-
that it really would be a disincentive for me
If
to buy
instead
that
I
in a
pay-
9-month regulation.
I pay more money, and the money invested in the Orange County system, GWRS, is over $600 million. If I pay more money for higher water quality, I put it in the ground so I can use it not just for irrigation, not just for cooling towers, but now I can use it for drinking water, where we're trying to get to reduce irrigation, higher use. I don't get any credit for that. So what you're telling
Yes,
me...
you do. You get the water. That's the wonderful thing.
I
really
get
don't
the water in the other uses anyway. And so from a consistency standpoint, this doesn't need to go to a work group. In fact, you can simply say indirect potable reuse should be treated exactly like purple pipe.
That's if we were creating a regulatory system long-term, as opposed to dealing with an emergency coming at us and trying to extend our resources in the face of what may be a multi-year drought.
I think it's compatible with the short term and certainly the long term. And it is something in the timeline that is a simple change. It's treating IPR like purple pipe that's in the regs. The second point, you heard from Yorba Linda on the fuel modification zones, and there was a question of, well, you should be reducing the amount of grass you irrigate anyway. Absolutely, and those utilities will be doing that. They have been doing it. You heard the numbers about the turf removal. The requirement is, and it is a regulatory requirement, not for the whole lawn, not for the whole property, but for that buffer area, it has to be irrigated under regulation. And as you've heard some people say, we need to be careful at this point of doing too much turf removal, because you end up having to, if you're putting in new vegetation now, that needs irrigation water to survive. What you want to do is take out turf now or not irrigate it now and wait till later to plant it for a better planting season than using the water now. This is a regulatory requirement, not for the whole lawn, for this strip, and that strip is all that's being asked to be removed from the production because it's required by regulation to do. And lastly, the issue that was in on regional compliance. In MODOC, we approached the SBX 7 requirements on a regional basis. It's worked very well there. In the MET allocations we use within MODOC, a regional compliance model. It's worked very well there. And a number of my agencies are interested in doing that in this regard in terms of 25% reduction. We support what you're doing. We all need to conserve much more water, and we'll make it happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we know we can. Thank you. Mr. Lyon, followed by Chris DeGroot from the city of Santa Clara. How are you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Richard Lyon on behalf of the California Building Industry Association. I'm the Senior Vice President. Our members produce the vast majority of housing in the state of California. We see ourselves as problem solvers, so you should see us as a partner in this solution. For decades, we've worked with regulators to ensure that housing is as energy efficient as it can possibly be, and we think we've done a very good job in that. We were key to the enactment of legislation a few years ago that linked transportation, housing, and land use on a regional basis to achieve our greenhouse gas reduction goals, and we have worked with the HCD and the Building Standards Commission in the adoption of California's green building standards that reduce water consumption within the home dramatically over homes that were built just a few years ago. So now we're in a situation where we're looking at outdoor irrigation, and again, we see ourselves as a partner in this. It's not going to be easy for our builders or our buyers, but we think that when done correctly, landscaping and irrigation measures that are undertaken by home builders today in real time can be a good example to the public of what it means to lead more efficient and water-conscious lifestyles. So 3 points to make. One, using the building code process through the Building Standards Commission is a good way to go about this. We have our experts working right now with the Building Standards Commission to undertake that effort. It's important that we have clear and workable standards and uniformity of application across all water agencies and all local building departments. Another issue that I'd like to raise that I think needs attention is the use, or at least it's a question of how we use potable water during the construction phase. In many areas of the state, we have locally adopted air and water quality regulations that are in place that mandate that construction mitigation activities and standards be in place to reduce dust emissions and reduce sediment. And in most of the situations, the way we do that is by watering and many times potable water. So if that is going to be a limitation on the use of potable water during the construction, that could cause a project to be in violation of local air and water quality regulations. We have a recommendation that in 864A, where we talk about preventing unreasonable use to promote conservation, and we talk about those things that are prohibited. There's an exception clause in there. We would recommend that you also include an exception for locally adopted air and water quality regulations. And then finally, we'd like to see language inserted into the resolution, and I apologize, I don't have it here in front of me, so I can't reference exactly what section. But it's important to note that residential construction is an essential part of the economy. And as we move forward to do this in a way that balances the imperatives for conservation, we need to make sure that we do it in a way that meets our housing goals as well. And certainly not these regulations and nobody here, but there's a cohort out there that will want to use the drought as a reason to put restrictions on water meter hookups or to impose moratoriums on housing construction. That would be a bad solution. It would be bad for the economy. It would result in overcrowding in older homes that are less water efficient, and it would likely increase the per capita water use as well. So we would like to see in the resolution some language that acknowledges that these regulations are intended to be implemented in a way that achieves the necessary conservation and efficiency standards, and at the same time meets or doesn't impact or impair the need to provide housing for a growing California. So happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your time.
I have a question for you, and maybe if staff could comment as well. Looking at resolution item 16 that references public health and safety, those air quality regulations are based on public health and safety. So it seems to me that you could utilize that in order to address, I guess the concern is that he's looking for it, an exemption, an outright exemption. But it seems to me that through enforcement discretion, maybe the goal could be achieved with what we have.
Well, we'll take a look at that. Of course, we would like to be as precise as possible. So if it's possible to reference local air and water quality regulations, that would be great. If there's another way to fit it in, then we're happy to look at that.
That section refers to a permit to comply with a term or condition in a permit issued by a state or federal agency. I think that's pretty broadly applicable, and it was intended at the outset to apply to situations such as these.
You could put local in, I suppose.
We could have
The air
local in.
districts
Yeah,
are
we're
a
talking
creature
here
of the
about
state,
local
even though
permits,
they're
though.
local.
Local permits.
But
yeah.
you could have a city permit.
That would be a way to handle it, sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for the time you've spent with our staff as well. All right. Mr. DeGroot, good to see you. You can correct me if I got the color wrong. I think it is burgundy. Followed by Amy Talbot from the Regional Water Authority.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Chris DeGroot. I'm the Director of Water and Sewer Utilities for the City of Santa Clara. For those folks that don't know Santa Clara, it's a medium-sized city at the south portion of the San Francisco Bay. It is home to 120,000 people roughly, and a number of high-tech companies, including Intel and Siliconics. We also happen to be home to Levi's Stadium. I'm here today to say that Santa Clara is supportive of the regulations as proposed, and we are very supportive of Section 16. We are actually one of those cities. 44% of our water sales go to commercial and industrial businesses. We also have seen, frankly, a hardening in our demand. Part of that is because we were an early adopter of recycled water. Currently, depending on what time period you look at for our city, 16 to 20% of the water that we sell is recycled water. Let me put that a different way. About 1 in 5 gallons of water that we sell is recycled water. A lot of that does go to irrigation, but also our largest customer is a power plant they use in their cooling tower. Our second largest customer is a paperboard manufacturer, and they actually use it in the manufacture of their paperboard. So recycled water, or as we like to refer to it, an industrial-grade water source, has a huge economic impact, and it is something that we really, really rely on and encourage the expansion of. Which brings me to my next point. One of the things that we are constantly running into is we have been implementing recycled water for 20 years. And during that 20-year time period, we're using the same approval process that we did 20 years ago. A lot of these sorts of projects are ones that have been done before. They're not new. They're not cutting edge. It's hooking up a cooling tower, hooking up an irrigation system, and yet we're going through a laborious process to get approval from the Department of Drinking Water. So we would appreciate anything that would help us streamline that and get that on board. And part of why we're looking at that is we are in the tier of 16%, and that I think is probably an enviable position. We actually were able to achieve 11%, but because of that hardening of demand, we're concerned about meeting that 16%, and we're concerned about next year. So we will be looking at that Section 16 very carefully and working with your staff, but we also, frankly, are up for the challenge. Our council just approved almost $500,000 for enhanced water conservation programs. That's 2% of our budget next year is going to water conservation. And with that, I'd take any questions. Thank you.
No, thank you for your leadership. It's a pleasure. Ms. Talbot, the Regional Water Authority, Sacramento, for those who don't know. Sacramento Water Authority. Next, and after her, Joseph V. Carlini from Tulare.
Great. Hello, I'm Amy Talbot from Regional Water Authority. RWA represents about 22 water agencies in the Sacramento area. We appreciate the severity of this ongoing drought and the challenges California is now facing because of it. But I want to be absolutely clear that the Sacramento area water providers are 100% committed to continuing and expanding the conservation efforts this next year and into 2016. However, we would be remiss in not expressing our concerns about the concerns that the board continues to allow significant inequity in the conservation targets for California communities, both within this region and outside the region. The framework places the greatest conservation burden on inland communities like ours. At the same time, some of the state's most populous areas have targets that are far lower than the governor's 25% target. For these reasons and more, we support ACWA's proposal that incorporates climate to increase the inequity in the framework. In spite of the current inequities that we're experiencing, the Sacramento area water providers are ramping up their efforts to meet the board's water conservation targets. The Sacramento region is and has been part of the solution. In 2014, this region was the only major metropolitan area that substantially responded to the governor's call for conservation, reducing water use by almost 20%. This comes on the heels of an overall 20% reduction in per capita water use in the decade leading up to 2013. With this, the board has set the bar very high for this region, effectively having to double our efforts that we did in 2014. Meeting such high targets will require extensive resources, as a lot of people have already said. We urge the state to prioritize funding to communities that require to meet these highest targets, so we can help our customers reduce the water use both during the drought and beyond. And just for a joke to keep us going, someone else already used Jerry Maguire, but I will say, show us the money, please. And thank you for your time.
That was where my head went right when you said that. Mr. Carlini? Lost him. I'll save that in case he comes back. Katie Ruark from Desert Water Agency, followed by Greg Thomas from Rincon del Diablo Municipal Water District.
Good afternoon. My name is Katie Rourke, and I represent Desert Water Agency. We serve the Palm Springs area, for any of you who don't know. First of all, we understand the severity of this drought. We share your concerns, and we have taken a great deal of action at this time. We've put $1 million into turf buyback. We sell 100% of the recycled water we produce. We're buying 100% of the sewer effluent available, recycling all of it, sending it away. We put restrictions into place. All of the above. Just want you to know that we're with you, and if we need to do more, we will. My concern here today is with the calculation of the residential GPCD. We've written to you, we've asked for help for this, and originally I planned to speak today begging and pleading, but after hearing for the presentation, I think I just need to support what's being presented. It sounds like you're going to let us submit some information, some local data that would help us to get a more accurate GDCP. And that's because in Palm Springs, as you know, we have a big tourism economy. So our population of tourists is very significant. Even more significant is our seasonal residents. And I can assure you, with all due respect, tourist water lawns, we have a huge, huge vacation rental population. And even more importantly, our snowbirds have their sprinklers running whether they're there or not. So they do matter, and they do need to be counted in our population.
And there needs
And
to be
they
some
do
new
need to be regulated,
regulations on
too.
the snowbirds.
Yes.
I have had conversations with folks in these areas, but yeah.
Yes, and you know, we're happy to be part of this. We're happy to implement those restrictions. And even with these new calculations, it's very likely we'll still be in a high tier. But what we were asking for is an accurate calculation. That's what we're looking for. So at DWA, about 30% of our bills are sent outside of our service area. So we know a lot of people are just not in the population number. The bottom line is that we're just using the wrong denominator. So we're asking for your help. We're asking that you approve that today, the ability of us to submit some local data, and we're happy to work with your staff on making sure that those numbers are accurate. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So, Mr. Thomas? David Boland from the Association of California Water Agencies, followed by Sarah Amizadeh from the Coastkeeper Alliance. Boland, saveourwater.com. We haven't said it enough today, I'm sorry. I got too intensely into the subject matter. Oh, I was forgetting myself.
Thank you, Chair Marcus and board members. And since we got that out of the way, I can move on then to the next points. 430 water agencies statewide, many of which are affected by this. We support the order. We compliment the staff. I've been complimented heavily for a process that's been extreme. We hope we never have to do this again. Maybe we will in 270 days.
Just give us a week off or something before we start. Give us a week off or so before we start any work groups, okay?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just a little bit of a breather here. So the big thing, I guess I want to talk about several things in our comment letter. One thing that has come up a little bit here and there, I just want to put an underscore on it, is this climate adjustment proposal that we offered. We had a concern about this RGPCD number for the summer period that was being used, and then used essentially just to rank folks straight up and down. We proposed a method that would adjust that slightly. We believe that if it works, and we believe it can work, using the staff's proposal in terms of tiering, it would move water agencies slightly down on the rankings if they are using more water. If they're GPCD, basically if they're in an inland or if they're in a coastal area and their GPCD is a little bit high, they would be moved down the ranking and they would get into a higher tier. However, those agencies, and one of them was mentioned earlier, the city of Imperial out in the desert has actually some pretty impressive GPCD numbers given their circumstances. And so this climate adjuster would benefit a situation like that, where their GPCD number, although high, is pretty impressive for where they are. And so they would potentially be dropped down slightly in the tiering. It reorganizes the targets slightly. Again, it doesn't really move people too much, but we think it does satisfy some of the equity concerns that a number of the agencies have just based on their circumstances and where they are. Now, we've heard the concerns about the need for the new normal. We need to start now, obviously, but we're talking about 270 days. You've made that point a lot of times. This is an immediate need, and we can't immediately shut people down. 50% or even maybe 90% drop off in outdoor irrigation in some communities versus maybe 10 or 20% in other communities is just not a fair thing for the state. So we want to get at this idea of equity by adjusting by climate.
And there just needs to be more time for a group to talk about it that includes some of those people whose numbers will go up that are not just the high water users, and include some of the low water users who've been doing it for a long time. So
Yeah,
this is one of those
but some of them
challenges where equity
could
is
do better.
definitely in the eye of the beholder, and I want to behold a conversation between people about it.
Yeah, and we think that we'd like to engage on that idea, that work group. We think it's a good idea, but we think that this adjustment needs to happen now. As far as the doubling of the tiers in 2% increments, we support that idea. It kind of smooths out the targeting. We think the groundwater should be included in the reserve water supply exception. We support the resolution addressing waste and unreasonable use. The exemption process that we had advocated for appears to be getting at that through the resolution number 16 and the idea of alternate methods and language to address circumstances. And you've brought that up a number of times for folks that have brought up circumstances that we were concerned about that needed to be addressed through some kind of an exception process. Credit for new supplies has been brought up a number of times. Again, we think there should be an incentive for that. We think it should happen now rather than in some delayed process, but we're willing to engage in that process as well. Collective conservation standard was an idea that was floated. We think that that has a lot of merit. Again, it's an idea that needs to be worked on. We think that if you see a few proposals from different regions that are based on some existing efforts that they've been successful with, that might be something we can look at for the next round.
No, that's a
should
good
we
point.
have to
Having
renew this.
concrete examples where folks have something worked through that meets all of our needs would be a much easier way to look at it than trying to craft something in theory.
Yeah, and I think the key for it, or the key point, is that the local groups themselves need to work together and work up the rules in a sense so that they're all kind of messaging their own customers and they're all successful together. And then finally, the standardizing the methods issue and the continued reception of submittals, trying to get the numbers right. You know, we've heard that theme a number of times. We support that, and we think it's important to do that going forward, especially in terms of compliance, as people look forward on their compliance numbers. We are reaching out to our members. We have some webinars planned on tools. We are looking at CII process water and some other issues. We want to engage with some of our colleagues in the other associations, making sure that the water industry understands that they are responsible for implementing some of the details of this, and that they're going to have to figure out how to really adjust this at a local scale to make it work, and that although there are some fairly extreme numbers that they're going to have to hit, that they can do that with some discretion, and they have a lot of potential opportunity, flexibility, maybe even some financial assets that they can get a hold of. And we want to work with the state to help roll some of those programs out as quickly as possible. But we are not naive to think that somehow turf replacement in maybe August is going to make a difference. So with that, I be willing to take any questions or just sit down.
One quick question, or one quick comment that I hope you will have a conversation with your folks. These regulations, this mandatory compliance happened this year, but last year we were, basically everyone was asked to do a voluntary 20%, and with a few exceptions, almost no one did, which is why we have mandatory. And so for those, particularly of your members who are really quite adamant about how important voluntary is, and I totally agree with them, it's when people don't do voluntary, this is what happens if we absolutely need the water. So have that conversation. It's not a conversation that I can have very well. I mean, I will, but it's responsibility for not seizing the day under the voluntary is leading to some of this.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, and Dave, I wanted to thank you for the hard work over the weekend and working with our staff, and thank staff too for running the numbers. I thought it was a useful exercise. I thought that was a value-added exercise where we looked at potential scenarios, ran the numbers together, in terms of how I look at it like a sensitivity analysis. If we made these adjustments, and then look at the 411 and how it affect them and what kind of potential targets. So I thought it was useful, regardless of the outcome. Those are questions that we should be able to answer through a process like this, and I appreciate all the hard work Aqua and your members and our staff put into that, the scenario planning. So I thought it was really useful. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, there you are. Hi, Sarah. Your turn, followed by Dustin Cooper from Paradise Irrigation District, Nevada Irrigation District, and South Feather Water and Power.